shootout that we all, I guess, hoped for. So you look at the point situation now on your screens. This is a Moto2 season which just deserved a final round decider, and that's what we've got. Yeah.
Well, not a terrible ride, was it, in Portimao, but really he needed to do something quite exceptional, and unfortunately we didn't see that. As you mentioned at the top of the show, this championship hopes won't really hang by a thread. 24 points in arrears from Manu Guys. You could say, Lewis, that fortune wasn't on his side in Portugal. He obviously caught a yellow flag at a really unfortunate moment at the end of qualifying, which in some ways limited him to 8th on the grid. But at the same token, we just didn't really see enough of him in the race. You could tell he wasn't quite comfortable on the bike. He had that big moment coming out of turn 5 early on when he was on the back of the top at 5 riders, lost touch with them, and yeah, then the complexion of his race really changed. And at no point really in the second half did you think that Manu was going to be able to catch the front 4 riders.
It does beg the question, had Manu Gonzalez qualified on the front row, would he have been able to challenge Joe Guerrero for victory anyway, given the pace we ultimately saw in the race? 3 riders dropped out of mathematical championship contention in Portimao. Here's one of them, Jake Dixon, who dropped out of the Grand Prix on the very last lap, which really has dealt a hammer blow to his hopes of finishing in the top 3 of the World Championship this season. Was on course to score 9 or 10 points, something like that, at the end of the race, depending on how the final lap had played out, which would have put him right in that battle with Baltus and Canet. He is still mathematically in the hunt for 3rd in the World Championship. But trails Barry Baltus now by 17 points and Aaron Canet by 11. So he needs to really win this Grand Prix and hope for some serious Bantic problems this weekend. Of course, who clinched the Teams Championship last time out in Portimao.
They did indeed, with Canet's 4th position and Barry Baltus's 5th. We'll come on a bit to the Belgian in a second, but yeah, Dixon was comfortably the top Boss Score rider, and I think he was just quite philosophical afterwards. He wasn't even really that upset when he cracked start in the final lap, because he felt that he had been riding above and beyond during that race, and you just have to look at the performance of the other Boss Scoros to agree with him, really. Filip Salac was one of those. Had a big moment in the first lap of the race and ran off turn 10. He rejoined in 20th. He had decent rhythm, but wasn't really going to be anything that could challenge the top 6 or 7 riders. We saw Celestino Vietti up at the front as well in the early laps, and he faded really badly toward the end, down to 13th position. And yeah, Jake had 1 or 2 moments that Bossexuro really do need to up their game over the off-season to try and live with the Calyx Challenge in 2026, and I think they're entirely justified. You just have to look at the performance in the last couple of races to really understand that yeah, they've been well short. They've been quite wanting in this final part of the year.
With, as you mentioned, with Dixon's crash, just one Bossexuro in the top 10 in the end. That was 10th place for Istvan Ukavara. It is a farewell to Moto2 this weekend for Alberto Reines. You've had the confirmation on screen. Yes, you are. Took a new path in his career. Come to you now that that path is with the AS Racing Squad. in the World Supersport Championship next season. Will be on a Yamaha R9 for 2026. Teammates to another world champion of Supersport 300, the Indonesian Aldi Mahendra. For those of you who enjoy your Superbike and Supersport action, we'll still see plenty of Albert Arenas next season. This is his 98th and final Moto2 start and his 172nd and final Grand Prix appearance, certainly for now at least.
He'll be hoping to go out with a bang. It's been a decent season overall. But Arenas was close sight there of Javi Zuratuta, who continues to deputise for the injured Joe Roberts. This is back home in California, resting up after it was confirmed that he had a wrist fracture after a really painful crash at Sepang. It's forcing him out of the final 2 races of this season. It's the 3rd time in the last 5 seasons that Joe hasn't been able to actually finish a season due to injury. Back in 21, he broke his collarbone at Misano. Last year, he broke his right wrist in Phillip Island. Here it's the left wrist, so he's not had a great deal of luck with injuries over the past 5 years, as we mentioned. And we just had sight there of Celestino Vietti, whose run continues. It looked like he was going to put that to an end in Portimao, but still chasing his first top 10 finish since that victory at Misano.
Scored just 8 points in the 5 Grand Prix since then. So yeah, the Celestino Vietti drop off in the last stage of the season. It's been pretty stark. We were talking about him potentially finishing up in the top 6 in the World Championship when he won in Misano. Only 8th in the points. Could potentially drop as low as 10th this weekend if Albert Arenas and Senna Regis score enough points to overhaul him. And here's Barry Baltus, who leads the chase for 3rd place in the World Championship and a place at the MotoGP Awards on Sunday night. Baltus currently 6 points ahead of his teammate Aaron Canet, and as mentioned, 17 ahead of Jake Dixon, which means from Baltus's point of view, to finish 3rd in the World Championship, a top 2 finish on Sunday will be enough.
You'd have to say it would be deserved as well. Baltus has been mentioned this so often this year. I think of Moto2 in 2025, being super consistent, and that 5th place in Portimao was his 12th top 6 of the year. Prior to this year, it only had 2 in 5 seasons, so that gives you an idea of the kind of step up, not just in terms of consistency but performance from Barry Baltus in 2025. And looking at his points haul from the second half of this season, he does figure somewhere toward the top as well. So Baltus in line for 3rd overall. He'll face stiff competition from this rider, though, you feel. This is not only his home track, but he goes very, very well at. The last time we came here, Lewis, and it was really the only rider that could live with Hermine Aldeguer, who won quite convincingly in the end, but it certainly made him work for the majority of that race, and that was probably Hermine's most impressive run of his entire career. And the final 4 races of 2023 when he was just dominating, and no one could really get close to him. It did final race, so I'm starting to think that maybe this weekend could actually be a decent farewell and finale for him and effectively.
He took pole position, of course, that weekend as well did Aaron Canet. He is a Valencia boy. There are a few of them in this Moto2 class. Jorge Navarro is another, as the yellow flags come out, and that's the reason Ethan Guevara on his outlap has gone down, coming through turn 6, which has already caught out a rider or 2 in Moto3 earlier on today. Team Danish went down there right in the beginning of Moto3 FP1, and Ethan Guevara has done the very same.
Well, just slides out from under former Moto3 champ, and a little look of exasperation as he runs toward his bike. Not a great deal of damage there, but apart from the ideal start for Ethan's weekend here in Valencia, yellow flags are out in Sector 2 as the marshals clear the damage from that little crash. Obviously, Ethan should be good to go.
He was, as mentioned, as a result of Jake Dixon's crash at the top Foscascuro finisher in the Portuguese Grand Prix. A top 10 finish for Guevara from 18 from the grid, which represents a decent recovery given how poor his qualifying was. Just worth spelling out to you some of the changes that we have this weekend. There's one key change which we'll come to in a second. It's largely an unchanged rider lineup because the replacement riders that we saw in Portimao are still here. We've already seen one of them. Xavi Zugatuza in for Joe Roberts. We also have Sergio Garcia once more in for the injured Darren Binder. Of course, will take his place full-time for next season. And, sadly, the injury that Denis Onchu suffered in the summer was the last we saw of him statistically this season. Just sort of 17 behind David Alonso here on screen of Dani Munoz. He is in for Onchu once again this weekend before Munoz moves across to the Italtrans team to replace, potentially, the outgoing world champion, Diogo Moreira, next season. And we do have one wild card this weekend. Red flag has just come out, by the way, in this session, as Adrian Huertas has now gone down, the other Italtrans rider. And he's high-sided. He's gone down there with, that looks like Sasaki, isn't it? The RW team, so they've come together. That's again in turn 6, so 3 riders down there in the shape of a couple of minutes. With riders being treated inside the racetrack, the race direction taking the sensible decision to call a Moto2 FREE.
Huertas wasn't looking in great shape there at the side of the track. Let's hope that the Spanish rider is okay. Like another one, maybe a collision going into the turn with Sasaki, so the race direction, we're on the ball. Certainly no point in risking things when a rider is lying at the side of the track just like that.
Sure, one's already gone down there minutes earlier.
Exactly. It's getting stretchered away by the trackside marshals, and good to see Ayubu is up on his feet at least. Huertas looking a bit worse for wear there, unfortunately.
Just when the Italtrans team wanted a smooth, trouble-free, incident-free, stress-free week. And we've already had some teammate Adrian Huertas already looking in a great deal of pain. Manuel Gonzalez is already having some pretty full-point discussions with his team, which returns the intact box. And just to reiterate, just as we were in the process of saying, just before the red flag came out, we have a wild card here this weekend. 22 Hector Garzo, the former Moto2 world champion, who is making his debut weekend on an NTS. Of course, we'll just a crucial moment there to understand what Aaron Kinnett was saying there to officials down in pit lane. So, really with the rather exasperated comments of Manuel Gonzalez on his return, clearly the other 2 riders have identified something that needs some attention out there on circuit.
That was looking pretty animated, as was Manuel Gonzalez. We're not sure exactly why. Something to do with the circuit, but also it's just speculation on our part. Difficult to pick up what Manu was saying to his crew. So the car is going out to inspect things up at turn 6 just to see how things are. And let's keep our fingers crossed that Huertas is relatively okay, even though he was being stretchered away there.
Shake of the head there from Jake Dixon, certainly not shaking his head at Aaron Kinnett, shaking his head while I think in agreement to what they're clearly both rather unhappy with at the moment out there on the circuit. No information at the moment in terms of what in particular they're unhappy with. It doesn't appear to us if there was any delay in the red flag coming out. It was thrown out before we got any signs of any yellows or any signs of any sort of crash out there on circuit. Asking a question of Robbie Rubio there, out of picture. As the said car now pulls over at turn 6. I guess they'll want to identify, given that we've seen 3 riders down at turn 6, but we don't know. We haven't seen the replay yet of the crash involving Sasaki and Huertas to know whether they had separate accidents or whether they have had a similar incident to Guevara and just crashed on their own. That's Loris Capirossi on the right, Tommy Alfonso to the left. We'll be taking a very close look the racetrack to see if there is any obvious visible sign of what's caused some crashes down there.
Just heard from one of the photographers, Cormac Browne-Meaden, who has been trackside. Said also a little bit precarious in Moto3 up at turn 6. He has photographs of many riders saving instant crashes up there. which is causing a few moments for riders. I'm sure Rossi and Alfonso will be right on that when they're inspecting the track just now.
Taking some Spanish going on down there at Fantic involving Aaron Cadet. So this could potentially be a little bit of a delay to proceedings. They won't necessarily want to open the racetrack if they're in no sort of way of knowing if they're inconclusive in terms of cause for the crashes. So our primary concern at the moment is to wish all the very best to Adrian Huertas. Saki was all back up on his feet as a result of that crash. Take a look at Ivan Otola, who's one of the few riders remaining in this Moto2 class without a podium. Already been spoiled the season with Colin Avaya's podium finish last time out in Portimao. We're now up to 17 riders who finished on a podium this season. Difficult to identify where any additional podium finishes could come from. Perhaps Ivan Otola, given his relative experience around here. Podium finish last time around here in Moto3 could potentially be one of the contenders to achieve that. Slippery then for Jake Dixon. Barely made it 3.5 minutes into this Moto2 FP1. No rider set a lap time at the start of the session before we brought a halt to things. So it's now the 100 Recaton that's filling the airways here at the Ricardo Tunnel circuit rather than some Triumph-powered Moto2 machines as Alfonso has a close inspection of the apex of turn 6.
Still remaining around turn 6, judging by Marshall carrying the leaf blower over there, which they can use to dry the track surface as well. There is Yuri Sasaki, good to see him back in the Hydrofobia Racing GP box. Giving the action with his hand signals that just tapped without any kind of warning. The expert in body language to understand what happened there, but you were a little bit shaken up after what happened at the start of this FP1 session.
He's not a rider that generally gets hot under the collar, is he, Sasaki, but really, understandably, given what we've seen at least post-crash, very perturbed and irritated by what's happened.
You were just saying that, Lewis, that Colin Mayer, he was our 17th different podium finisher. I mean, it has been a crazy year for variety in Moto2. Been in this run for quite some time. 10 different winners, 17 different podium finishers across the year. And that is more than half the grid that have been capable on their day of competing up at the front and finishing on the podium. Lauder, of course, was one of those names as well. Really, I think we can look at Pirelli here in Moto2. Pirelli car has been a real reason for that. It has been something of a leveler in some respects. I mean, last year we had 18 different podium finishers, which I think is a record for the intermediate class in one season. I'm not sure if you can remember how many riders we won last year, but it certainly was...
It was 8 or 9, was it? 8 or 9 season?
Yeah, I'm sure it's around that number as well. So, I think the race in Moto2 is where it's at currently.
Just the field is so close. We often see it in qualifying sessions, we often see it in practice sessions where second, if not less than that, sometimes split the top 10 or even the top 14, which will of course be crucial this afternoon when we see riders through to qualifying too. So if you could just actually ace it on a given weekend, and you can turn yourself from popular midfielder into genuine podium contender. So I'd say that some of those podium finishes of the 17 we've had, you can't say at all those podiums were fluky podiums or fortunate podiums. They were genuinely earned through hard work and good performance over the weekend. Here's one of your record 10 winners, Celestino Vietti, who's claimed victory back on home soil at the San Marino Grand Prix. certainly one of the poster boys for how disappointing a Boscoscuro season it's been in 2025. So much was expected of them. Having won the Riders' Championship La Ligura last season. Yes, they have taken overall 4 Grand Prix victories this year, 3 for Jake Dixon, plus Celestino Vietti's success in Misano. But it's kind of been a situation with Boscoscuro this season where they've needed conditions to be truly in their favour for them ultimately to take the fight to Calais.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's 3 races of the season. Jake Dixon won 2 of them. Celestino Vietti had finished on the podium once and should have been ready on the podium twice. We were thinking after Texas that both of those riders would be in the hunt for the championship. Some big information that there is some water down at turn 6. See there that there is a little bit of a clean-up operation in the process. Seen by Tony Alfonso. Yeah, ultimately it's been quite a disappointing year for the Boscoscuro effort, and you just have to look at some of the names that are within the ranks. How poorly they performed relative to the rest of the competition. The likes of Ethan Guevara, who is now in his 3rd season in Moto2 FREE, had a largely terrible season, I think it's fair to say, in his 5th year in this category. And riders like that are struggling so comprehensively week on week, and there is something up.
Aaron Canet giving some information to Sam Cripper by the looks of that. Looking at the back of his head. Something all we can hear is music for the conversations. So Sam Cripper, the chief MotoGP steward nowadays, but of course be able to feedback information to race direction. Of course, Boris Caparossi and Tony Alfonso the scene. Just informing them of what the process will be from now. So they will feedback information from the corner at turn 6, as you can see the lead guys there were trying to dry the impact, in particular at turn 6, basically the racing line. You can see that operation taking place. And only when they're satisfied that the circuit is safe to continue on, will they send riders back out once again. Saw Diogo Moreira on screen a moment ago inside the box. Did actually catch up with Diogo yesterday. Really, nothing else to ask him how he's feeling about this World Championship decider that's ahead of him. And he said he's relatively calm at this stage. He said the nerves were really in the early part of the Portuguese Grand Prix when he was up behind, or ahead of Colin Bio and then behind him. Just a little uncertain and unsure of himself given what was on the line in Portimao. He isn't really thinking of this as a weekend of needing to finish in the top 14. Because the very easiest way to finish in the top 14 is to finish first and win the Grand Prix. And I think that's one thing that really has to be admired about Diogo Moreira, is the higher the pressure has been in this Moto2 season, the better seemingly he has got pole positions now. 3 of the last 4 Grand Prix, a pole that didn't quite come from nowhere, but not far off in Portimao days ago. With Manu Gonzalez behind him, we've been well aware that Gonzalez is behind him. He wasn't quite sure how far behind him in that Grand Prix. Would have been forgiven Diogo for just saying 2nd place will do me just fine. I'll stay behind Colin Bio, who might want this victory a bit more than me in this Grand Prix. He hasn't won the Moto2 before. I'm fighting for a World Championship, but he was prepared to go for it. He was prepared to go for the big points, and was rewarded with all 25 as a Moto2 race winner in Portimao. And whether you can truly put Manu Gonzalez's dip down to pressure, I think there are more factors at play than that. There is no question that when the pressure has been on, Diogo Moreira has risen rather than shrunk.
Yeah, that is a very fair comment, I would say, Lewis. So many moments through the weekend in Portugal when it wasn't looking brilliant for Moreira. I mean, he didn't exactly boss the field on Friday, but considerably well off it. And then lost a decent chunk of FP2, in fact all of FP2, because it was wet and the track was dry. A lot of riders saw no sense in going out that session on Saturday morning, Portugal 1 week ago, he was just sat chilling on pit wall, working with his mechanics, speaking with other riders, and it's a little picture of relaxation. All at the time that maybe it was something of an act that he was putting that on, but in reality he was just feeling kind of relaxed. And this advanced stage of the championship, that is a real skill to carry that kind of composure. We saw that in his riding. He delivered the pole position lap exactly when it mattered. And aside from a few nerves at the start of the race when it was clear that he wasn't riding freely up at the front in the lead, you could see both group of riders bunching up behind him. Once he got into second, he was able to get his concentration back and go again. And as you said, Lewis, really did not need to overtake Colin Bayer. Took considerable risk at the end of that race, but he decided to go for it. Which has really been on in the second part of the season. Moreira has been the one that's risen to the challenge. And I think after a ride like Portimao, this point of the season where you're looking for performances which define a champion and define a championship, that race in Portimao certainly was one of those where you thought, Moreira, he deserves to be Moto2 champion this year.
Yeah, I hadn't noticed at the time when we were calling the qualifying session live, that qualifying lap that Moreira did, he overturned a quarter of a second deficit in the final sector and ended up taking pole position from Jake Dixon.
Yeah, we weren't that excited about this lap.
We weren't paying attention to it.
Yeah, because we were just seeing grey sectors with Joe Moreira, and then suddenly, he, out of nowhere, jumped up into first position right at the end, and we thought, how did that happen?
Yeah, he didn't actually pull out the fastest final sector of the second. That was Colin Bayer, obviously on his way to qualifying himself on the front row of the grid. But it came from nowhere. Clearly, he was taking a level of risk, and he gets pushing through that final sequence of right-handers to earn that pole position. He was prepared to put it all on the line, whereas others potentially weren't. And of course, he got that lap in moments before Alan Canet crashed in qualifying 2 and brought the yellow flags out. Just to reiterate, Gonzalez wins this Valencia Grand Prix on a Sunday afternoon. Hopefully gets underway at 12:15 local time here in Valencia on Sunday. Now we'll see what happens. We're going to see riders come together. Yeah, these are 2 separate crashes. That's a big high side there for Adrian Huertas. And is Sasaki going to then come into the picture and have his own accident because Sasaki's not there at the moment. I think is this the Yumi Phillips picture now? We're not going to see it, but that was a clearly separate independent crashes for Adrian Huertas and for Yumi Sasaki. Saw from Guevara that it was a front ender, but it was the rear lighting up and firing Huertas to the scene of the accident, which saw him go down. I understand why he was in so much pain as a result of that. That's some CCTV footage that Race Direction will have available to them to monitor any incidents in track and also track limits through the weekend. Just to remind you of what the 2 championship contenders need this weekend. Manny Gonzalez wins. Diogo Moreira needs to finish 14th or better. He's champion. Any other result for Manny Gonzalez and Moreira is champion automatically. There is only one scenario where Manny Gonzalez can be crowned champion. That is if he wins the Valencia Grand Prix and Diogo Moreira is outside the top 14. If Moreira is 15 and Gonzalez wins, they will finish this year's World Championship level on points. But by virtue of Gonzalez winning on Sunday, he will take the tiebreaker by virtue of his then 5 wins to Diogo Moreira's 4.
Yeah, on the basis of recent form, that is not looking so likely. We've seen in the second part of the year as Adrian Huertas' bike has been brought back into the Italtrans box. Extensive damage to the seat unit. Still no word on Adrian's condition, but let you know when we have an update. Whilst Huertas, it did look as though he was conscious on that stretcher and was moving, but understandably in some severe pain. I remember Philip Sarge having a crash on their Moto3 back in the day, and yeah, it was a similar kind of high side, which really hurt the Czech rider. Hope that Huertas will be okay to continue through the rest of this weekend.
Turn 60 at Colnieto corner. It's not a fast corner by any means. It's a second gear, around 80 kilometres an hour, 50 miles an hour. In pure dry conditions with hazards to be wary of. Also, it can be high side in that sort of manner. It can do some serious damage both to the motorcycle and to the rider. So we wish Huertas all the best. Saki was all absolutely fine. We may not see him again in the rest of this session. Now look at where he sits second, and rather distant second now in the World Championship. Manu Gonzalez. Fortunately for Manu Gas, the run goes on. It's the Czech Grand Prix pre-summer break. Still only outscored Diogo Moreira on one occasion. And what Diogo Moreira is actually looking to do this weekend, and Gonzalez will enjoy us saying this, if Diogo Moreira does win the Moto2 World Championship this weekend, it would be the biggest comeback in terms of points in intermediate class history. He was 61 points behind after the French Grand Prix, 60 points back after the Czech Grand Prix at the midway point of the season when we went off for our summer holidays. No one has ever won an intermediate class championship from that far back in terms of points.
Yeah, there's been 84 points swing in Moreira's direction over the past 9 races, which is absolutely staggering. When you consider the form and the consistency of Manu Gonzalez in the first part of the season, fortunately, his form has tailed off. And it must have been so demoralising for Manu back in Portugal. He had such a brilliant pre-season test there way back in February, where he was comfortably faster than all of the two riders and teams that were there. And I'm sure he was going into Portugal thinking, this is my chance to really get back at Diogo. It wasn't ever really apparent, was it? It did look okay on Friday, did Manu. It wasn't as though he was head and shoulders above the rest of the riders, though. And thereabouts with this rider here, Dick Dixon, Aaron Canet, Barry Baltas, but it's like we saw Manu in a prominent in that race on Sunday, where just a bit toothless, I think you can maybe say, able to affect the riders up ahead, and feel that race was quite symbolic really of the second part of the season. It was there or thereabouts, but just not really able to impact on the top places. So it's been a shame for Manu. It's still been a very, very positive season for him on the whole. Christian went across from World Supersport, winning your 4th season in Moto2, fighting for the championship and nearly winning the championship. I mean, it's a pretty good achievement, but we do hope that the disappointment of this year won't kind of hang over him going into the off-season, because losing that kind of advantage, I think, can really mentally.
Must have been such a mental hammer blow to lose that second place in Indonesia through no fault of his own at all. Disqualified through, I guess could be politely termed as a technicality, but ultimately he was riding a motorcycle that didn't conform with the regulations, didn't gain any material benefit or any lap time advantage from it. Fortunately, was riding a legal motorcycle on the Sunday in Indonesia. Had he been given that second place, had he not been disqualified, there would be just 4 points between the top two, and we would genuinely have a winner-takes-all shootout between Moreira and Gonzalez this weekend. But Diogo Moreira would still, even with that, be leading the World Championship at this point. He would have taken the points lead away from Manu Gonzalez in Portugal.
All ifs and buts and hypotheticals at this stage. I'm sure Manu would argue that had he not been disqualified in Indonesia, he wouldn't have been attacking so forcefully in Malaysia. You would have seen Diogo Moreira behind him and thought, you know what, I'll let him through and just follow him home. Be no big drama. But as it was, he really had to go on the attack from that moment, and he could not afford Moreira to get through. Malaysia was arguably, well, I think Indonesia and Malaysia were arguably the 2 biggest swings of the championship.
Then when you consider far down on the grid Diogo Moreira was going into the Malaysian Grand Prix. 16th, of course, he qualified after the stroke recorded mid-session where he and Manu Gonzalez were scrapping like they were on the last lap battle for the World Championship on the first time laps of qualifying 2. It's interesting, isn't it, with Diogo Moreira, because no one really spoke of him as a World Championship contender coming into this season. I think we all expected podiums and potentially a win from him this season. Of course, second season in the Moto2 World Championship. Clinched the Rookie of the Year prize at the final round of last season. It was very nipped up with Cederace's Rookie of the Year last season. What was the first point this season where you really considered Moreira a genuine title threat? Even when he won in Assen, I'm not sure at that point I genuinely believed that the title challenge was coming from Brazilian.
Yeah, I would say that's a fair question. I mean, it was clear from earliest point in the season when he just missed out on the podium back in Thailand.
Austria, maybe, would it be, when Manu Gonzalez, DNF and Diogo won?
Possibly, yeah. But then just a couple of races after that, we were in Barcelona and he was 14th. And I have to say, after that, I thought, well, that's it over for Diogo. Not to say the manner in which he responded to that some disappointment at Barcelona really has been so impressive. And that was the only Grand Prix in the last 9 in which Diogo has been out of the top 5. As I said previously, had we not had that incident in Saxony, then effectively put him out of Brno. He was very injured there and basically just served his long lap penalties and then retired. That really good run would have stretched back even further for Diogo. So essentially it has been from got back to Europe. I think Jerez, the Spanish Grand Prix, Diogo has been constant inside the top 4, top 5 positions, and that consistency has ultimately led him to win the championship. But to answer your question, Lewis, I would say honestly it was probably Indonesia. I seriously thought, okay, this is, he can win this, he can really probably win this. Up until then I really had my doubts, I would say, because we'd never seen the complete weekend. We arguably still haven't. I mean, yes, he's had 4 positions and then gone on to win like we saw in Portimao, but we haven't seen Diogo Moreira properly assert himself on a Friday morning and carry that all the way through. To be fair, with his amount of experience in the class, that is to be expected. We are talking about a rider still in just his 2nd season. So we have confirmation that pit lane will open in just over 5 minutes' time, which is certainly good news. It sounds as though the marshals have done their job up at turn number 6 and should have some action back on track very soon indeed. Yeah, it took me some time to become a proper Diogo believer, and I would say that after the performance of Portimao, I'm quite a vote for it. It's only taken 21 runs.
He won't got there in the end. I think that's the start of the season as well. Moreira was sort of the cocky underdog that just refused to quit, wasn't he, in some of those battles with Senna Regis. On a couple of occasions, actually, when they were battling for the podium in Thailand, and then again in Jerez, where it's fair to say that Diogo didn't please Senna with some of his aggression and tenacity in that particular race. But yeah, if you chart Moreira's progress from Silverstone, where he took his first podium of the season when he finished in 2nd place. To maiden winner Senna Regis. It was British Grand Prix. That was round 7 of the season, so we're already nearly a third of the way into the season when Moreira took his first podium of 2025. Of course, the Sachsenring and Brno non-scores can kind of be lumped in together because one directly led to the other. Of course, his crash from 25th on the grid to the podium battle, and then the collision with David Alonso as he rejoined the track from the mistake at the Omega corner. Left him with a pit lane time Brno, which of course he then rode through injured, essentially turned up in Brno to serve the penalty, if nothing else. Since Qatar, he's been outside of the top 5 at the checkered flag. Of course, those 2 races pre-summer break and the Catalan Grand Prix. Other than that, he has been a permanent top 5 finisher since the European season, all the way back in April. Kind of snuck up on us in this Moto2 season, but further back you look, lines were there.
Yeah, exactly. Stage of the season and never quite came to pass. And if you speak to Diogo Moreira's manager, Diego Silvente, he would point out to the fact that in Argentina, I think he had an issue with something that was out of his control up against the tire. Look at Osterman, the 21st, that was obviously a weather-afflicted weekend. Started on slicks on a wet track, did not go to plan at all, finished 21st. So take those 2 out of the equation, and you're essentially looking at a rider that had top 5 potential every single race this year, which, yeah, again, is really quite impressive consistency. We saw that in pre-season as well. Where was he in the 2 tests? 4th and 5th. So, writing was on the wall right from the start, but I have to say, thought that we would see podiums, we would see the occasional win from him, we would maybe see a challenge for the top 4 or 5 positions in the championship, but Diogo has far exceeded my expectations for this year, and yeah, the performance brought him out. As I said previously, that was a champion drive, it really was. Dealt with the nerves, dealt with the pressure all weekend long, faced adversity at certain points and just overcame it with minimum fuss. Speaking to him afterwards, he always just comes across so calm. Doesn't give the impression that there are many super highs with him or many super lows. Everything's taken with a very measured environment. And we know that that is something you need in a racing season, especially over 22 rounds when you'll inevitably be faced with really tricky weekends and difficult situations. Also quite interesting hearing Paul Bear speaking he was talking to some of our Dutch colleagues in Dutch after he had done his English debrief, and Paul was saying what he could see in Diogo's riding during pre-season, he felt he was ready to step up to MotoGP at that point. He felt that he had already completely understood how to ride a Moto2 bike at that early stage of the season. And he said when it comes to handling pressure, comparing with Manny Gonzalez, there's only been one winner this year, and that's coming from another Grand Prix winner and a Moto2 podium finisher, so Paul Bear very much in the Diogo Moreira icon.
Well, he's got one more test to try and clear this weekend, one more hurdle to try and jump over to be crowned Moto2 World Champion. That's to finish in the top 14 this weekend, on the basis, of course, that Manny Gonzalez wins on Sunday, which he has to do first. If Manny Gonzalez doesn't achieve that, then Diogo Moreira is world champion, whether he finishes first or whether he finishes last in this final round of the season. That's your new schedule for MotoGP on their free practice 1 session. Gets underway at 11:10. We're hot on the heels of this soon-to-be restarted Moto2 FP1 session. Gets underway in 3 seconds' time. We'd like to give you a little bit of a peek behind the scenes here in the commentary box in Moto2. Our thanks to Elliot York, who of course is going to be joining us from pit lane tomorrow for Moto2 and Moto3 qualifying, who was hot-footing it to go and get the pit lane overline kit to give us some help during the red flag, only for them to immediately announce when we were restarting. So Elliot has been stood down, but we thank him for at least trying to race to our assistance. The session is now underway. We can now talk about some actual action on the racetrack. Yes, the riders will be approaching turn 6 on this outback with a little bit of trepidation.
I would say they certainly will. The exploratory laps, I would say, are on turn 6 before they really get on some fast lap times. Danny Munoz is the first of those. You can see just taking it quite easy as he comes in towards the apex and full gas once he's past that. It'll be interesting this weekend to see some lap times, Lewis. One that we're now obviously in our 2nd season with Pirelli. We didn't come here in the 1st season with Pirelli last year, 2024. So it's outright circuit record of 133.3. I think is going to be demolished this weekend if experiences at previous tracks or we visited this year and last or anything to go by won't take long to assert themselves as the fastest power supplier that we've had in this Moto2 category since they came in. Surprised to see these riders maybe down in the 32s at some point this weekend, maybe 31s, can I say.
You could see riders from the outside shot there, just perhaps giving the very inside of the circuit a little bit of space there on the way through turn 6, so they're clearly aware of something that needs to be monitored. That's unfortunately Yumi Sasaki 71 RW Cal-X that won't be ridden, it would appear, for certainly the initial restart of this session. Sasaki, of course, having his own accident, which we haven't seen Bottas's crash, but Sasaki clearly crashing into the same zone. And I guess one would immediately think, has Yumi Sasaki crashed in the yellow flags? But I guess given the mitigating circumstances with the stoppage of the session, I think Yumi Sasaki will be okay for that one.
Yeah, may have to go and explain his case and give race direction, the F1 stewards, a bit of an understanding of what happened from his point of view. But yeah, let's see what happens if indeed be some water down at turn number 6. That might go some way to explaining what happened with Yumi. So first of all, it's good that he's okay, and secondly, sending our thoughts to Adrian Huertas, still not update on the Spaniard's condition. It would be a shame if he was unable to end this season with some racing action. We have seen some real signs from Huertas in the last part of this year, and he's starting to get the hang of Moto2. Really excited to see what he can do next year. You see Moto2 on the screens there. That's a name that will be familiar to regular watchers of Moto2, a rider that used to ride in this category full-time. Garzo is a couple of years he was riding for Sito Pons's Moto2 team. I think they were over in Moto E as well, champion last year. Real injury hit 2025. But having a bit of light relief here at the end of the year on that NTS chassis.
Of course, his weekend to end all weekends in Moto2, which this is his 37th Moto2 starts weekend. Did come here in 2020. You might all recall Hector Garzo qualifying and finishing a very close second behind Jorge Martin in the Valencia Grand Prix 5 years ago. As if he could pick a circuit to make a wildcard appearance once again in Moto2, this would be the one. So how dirty offline it was when Garza went wide and coming through turn 11, where the long lap penalty is situated around this circuit. So this track will need a little bit cleaning up in this early stage of the weekend. Jake Dixon has your initial fastest lap time on the board of 1:35.5, which is a couple of seconds, as Neil pointed out, away from the fastest ever laps. Good to see Ethan Guevara here back on track. It didn't appear from the shot we saw of his crash that too much damage had been done, and the delay to proceedings has allowed the Blue Crew Pramac Yamaha squad to ensure that Guevara has got a fully functioning motorcycle to rejoin the session with.
Squirrel will be taking a quick screenshot of that time and tire on your left, where we've got 6 Squirrel frames inside the top 7, but as we said, exploratory laps at this point.
No Calix is in the top 7 at the moment. Thiago Moreira, the championship leader, is in 8th. We've got Boscoscuro's first to 4th until Munoz just went second, and then we had the forward of Jorge Navarro, was home favourite here, the Valencia boy on the number 9, who's now in 6th place. So those yellows down at turn 6, they are. So the rider hasn't heeded the warnings we've already had so far this morning, and it's Ethan Guevara for the second time, who's now crawling away on his hands and knees. He's crashed twice in essentially 4 laps at turn 6.
It's me. Ethan Guevara having an absolute nightmare here on Friday morning in Valencia. To crash twice in the same session is one thing, to crash twice at the same corner as well is something else, and I'm sure that will be a bit of a concern for these riders out there when they rock up to turn 6 and see the yellow flags out again.
One wonders, because we saw a lot of riders going through turn 6 and almost sort of picking the bike up as they're going around to 6 to avoid some still damp areas of the racetrack. Who knows? Guevara didn't do the same. Miserable Friday morning it's been for Ethan. Moto3 winner here back in 2022 at the end of his glorious title-winning season. This is what's happened to Guevara. So this is now through the right-hander of 4. 5 is coming up next, and in fact it's not turn 6. Fortunately, it isn't a problem with the corner, it's a problem with a high side coming through 4 for Guevara and landing on his back, of course, giving a bit of a punch in the ribs and in the chest by the bike as well. So it wasn't turn 6 on this occasion for Ethan Guevara, it was turn 4. Another corner that, in fairness, needs your full attention around this Valencia circuit.
Below the temperatures, the more caution is required into turn 4. It's the first right-hander on this track for quite some time. Turn 12, it's the last time that you use it. Right-hand side of the tyre considerably. Behind here, really looked like it hurt, didn't it? It's able to and walk away from the crash up at turn 6 previously, but that is going to really require some medical attention. So just Adrian Huertas will...
With no real running place at the moment. Be improving on that 1:35.866. 34.7 at the moment. Then your snap of the morning from Jake Dixon. Gonzalez in 2nd place. He's the only other rider at the moment in the 34s. Arbolino trying to give the Blue Crew Pramac squad something to smile about this morning. He's 3rd, ahead of championship leader Moreira. Philip Salat should be soon to be departing Moto2. Albert Arenas in 6th place. Here's a rider, or there was a rider, David Alonso, who we should touch upon. He's part of a fast pair of rookies at the moment now on the circuit, with Ivan Ortola leading them into the final corner. Alonso is just a couple of bikes further back down the road, so we'll pick him up out of the final corner very, very shortly. So Ortola on the number 4 for the Side squad. He'll be partnered by Angkop de Keras next season in this intermediate class. Goes across the line to move up into third place. Alonso is just behind Moto2 at the back of the picture, and he stays in 15th place. David Alonso comes into this final round of the season on the back of 3 consecutive podium finishes in Moto2.
In those closing laps, you thought, you know what, he might actually be able to overtake both Veyer and Jochen Moreira up ahead. He did look as though he had a little more speed in those last 3 or 4 laps. It was kind of typical stuff from Alonso, wasn't it? Really showing that he's one of the strongest names at the end of most Moto2 races 2025. And this kind of consistency now at this late stage of the year. He was saying afterwards, when he was speaking to Jack Don Park Fermi, just how difficult it is to adapt yourself from being a Moto3 rider when, let's say, you're not always within the same tenth of a second in a race situation. You can kind of, well, just because of the nature of the big battles that you have in Moto3, sometimes the lap times fluctuate 1 to maybe sometimes 2 seconds from the fastest that you're able to do. Into that area where you're within a tenth of a second of your fastest lap every single time around is really something that's quite difficult to do. That was really very complimentary of Colin Veyer's riding throughout the Portuguese Grand Prix, and Jochen Moreira just up ahead of him. The fact that they were so consistent, and it was just understanding to really be able to do that kind of thing. So another really good lesson for him. And he also said afterwards that back in Argentina, when he was really, really struggling, I think he said the only thing that was behind me on track was the pace car.
He's not wrong.
Yeah. But he was, what was he, 20th in the grid, 20th in the race, the one that won 14 races the previous year.
I didn't wonder when he won, didn't he? That he was genuinely in tears in the early part of his rookie season in Moto2. So hard to find a step up.
Yeah, and for him now to be ending the year in this way, where he's just consistently there. Not a surprise to see David Alonso up there at the front anymore. It does bode well, I feel, for 2025. I would be absolutely amazed, absolutely shocked. He hasn't already had some very, very serious conversations with MotoGP factories with the view to 2027. I mean, if you're the likes of Honda or KTM, I mean, you would be stupid, really, if you're not already putting feelers out there to say what you think about our potential plans in 2027. Here's what we could offer you. It just makes total sense looking at this rider's trajectory and how he's developed throughout this year. And not any big predictions, but going into 2026.
I've got to say that I'd be equally surprised if bookmakers aren't already installing David Alonso as the title favourite next season. We'll have a chance this afternoon session when we review 2025. We'll also have a little look ahead to 2026, but so much to be excited about in this Moto2 class for next season. So many of the big hitters sticking around. Of course, we are losing to Moto2 some sets this Moto2 class. Of course, moving up to MotoGP for next season is Diogo Moreira. We also lose Jake Dixon to the World Superbike Championship for next season. Alvaro Reinas, he moves to World Supersport for next season too. The vast majority of the heavyweights from Moto2 this season are staying where they are. That's when you add into the mix for Moto2 next season 3 world champion Jose Antonio Rueda, the rider who's currently on course to finish runner-up to him, although that's not confirmed, and Angkop de Keras, who joins Ivan Artola at the MSI squad. Luca Veneta moving up to Moto2 next season with the Speed RS team. Tayo Perasato moving to Moto2 as well next year with Honda Team Asia. So often the case, no sooner do we wave goodbye to some experienced Moto2 campaigners, but another exciting crop of rookies are moving up to take their place.
It should be another exceptional year next year when you think of the performances of Dani Holgado, that Dani Gonzalez is going to be sticking around for another year. Harry Baltas as well should be stronger. 2026, Aaron Canet will be with a different team. We'll have Dennis Onju back as well, of course, and he'll be riding with Mark VDS. Yeah, I mean, all of those names that I've mentioned, you would imagine up there. Senna Ages potentially being another year of experience under his belt.
we add potentially the name of Colin Vire to that as well, having taken his first podium this time out in Portsmouth, with touching on his impressive weekend where he really did explode onto our attention with his front row qualifying, taking third on the grid in Portimao, set the fastest lap of the Grand Prix in the race, and ended up finishing a very close second to Diogo Moreira. It's fair to say that through his rookie season, which started in similar fashion to Alonso, it's fair to say in terms of the results that Vire was achieving at the start of the season, he's just been gradually putting the building blocks in place, hasn't he, through this season. Of course, managed by the ultra-experienced IO squad, even if this is Nicky's first year at the helm, fully at the helm of that Moto2 squad, and he's just very maturely gone about his rookie season, even with, as he pointed out after the Grand Prix last Sunday, some off-track turbulence that he's had to deal with.
Yeah, that's a good show. Colin might have one or two harsh words for me for overlooking him for a potential spot in the championship fight next year, but yeah, it's been a far from straightforward year, hasn't it? Some personal tragedy, losing one of his cousins back before the season started in a racing incident which was absolutely devastating for the family. He said there was another bereavement as well, the family leading up to Portugal as well, which is something they had to deal with. It's in the situation with Jose Antonio Rueda and that awful crash that we saw death dealer back in the sliding lap from Moto3 race in Malaysia. Thankfully, both riders on a decent road to recovery currently, miraculously so after those horrible images that we saw back in Sepang. And you know, Colin is really good friends with Jose Antonio Rueda. I think it's a really tightly knit team in IO. So to see all that, I think, was really quite difficult for him. Add in the fact that his adaptation to Moto2 was very difficult. Then he had a big injury, an injury, a third of the way through the season. And speaking to him after the race in Portugal, he was saying that was actually one of the best things that could have happened to him, to have that injury. But before that, he got into such a negative mind space, headspace, and just really was quite glum, quite down. Wasn't anywhere near as quick as he thought he should be. I think he had scored just 5 points prior to staying in that injury. And yeah, had a good chance to evaluate things over the summer break. And since the summer break, has been a proper Moto2 rider, you could say. Came back in Austria, scored a top 10 finish, and from there, he's been a regular inside the top 10. And a couple of front row appearances as well, one in Barcelona, one in Portugal. The confidence with which he led the race in Portugal was so impressive. And I have to say, Lewis, he was sleeping on us throughout the weekend. At no point on Friday when I was looking through the fastest times was I thinking Colin Vare's going to be fighting for a podium here this weekend.
Yeah, given as you say that he was the one dictating the pace for so much of the race, dictating a very fast pace too at the front of the race. You can't say enough good things about that performance from Vire. It's also worth pointing out that physically he wasn't exactly operating at 100% in those latter stages either.
Yeah, exactly. I caught up with his dad, Jurgen, yesterday, and he was saying that he had told Colin, just remember, the only reason you lost that race is because your arm, because he still doesn't have full strength in his arm, and I think he got very tired toward the end of that race in Portugal. And yeah, his dad most certainly felt that was the reason why he wasn't able to respond or even to keep Diogo Moreira behind him. So certainly very positive. It was also detailing their extensive fitness training regimen that he is going to be undergoing throughout the winter months. Really, no stone will be left unturned for the Fair family as they prepare for their second Moto2 season. And we know that these guys are seriously tough, but Colin was telling us that when he made his return in Mugello from that arm injury that he sustained, he said his strength was so low, and he'd obviously taken a bit of a hit to his fitness because he wasn't able to train with the kind of same intensity while he was recovering. He said he was almost spewing up in his helmet during that Mugello race weekend. Such was the physical demands on his body. Really quite difficult to get back into the saddle from Moto2 bike, and yeah, it did take him some runs for Mugello to get back up to speed. He ran as he was coming to terms with that big player. He had 14th, 16th and 16th for his results just before the summer break. But as previously said, that 3-week period where he was able to recover recover his fitness and recover his strength, and to understand a few things that he needed to work on the bike. Really did help him out. So great to see Colin up there. We obviously knew from his Moto3 days that he is a massive talent and a real animal when it comes to work ethic and the kind of training that he puts in. He is a really intelligent young man. Yeah, as you said, it's not just Alonso and Holgado, the rookies this year, that we have to watch out for next year. I think Weyer is a very good shot as well.
Here's another who will hope to be in that conversation too. Hasn't had the same limelight his rookie season as Ivan Ortola. There have been one or two highlights. He scored points actually in 10 of the last 11 Grand Prix as Ivan on the Oscar-Scuro. Though unfortunately for him, the vast majority of those have been 11 to 15, only 4 top 10s in that time. Front row qualifier in Assen earlier in the season was Ortola in a couple of top 6 finishes. One in the wet, one in the dry, Austin and Austria respectively. The best we've seen from Ortola so far this season. I guess he will be looking rather enviously at the other rookies who've all had Calyx machinery to enjoy this season, whereas Ortola has been trying to find a good fight on board that MSI at Oscar-Scuro, whereas there's been a bit of a revolving door on the other side of the MSI box. Certainly wouldn't expect that to be the case next season when he's going to have a very talented young teammate in the form of Angel Piqueras. As MSI look to points back last year's champions, of course, in this class. And they're going much tougher second time around.
Yeah, it's been a real tough season, hasn't it, for that team? Not just results, but also the number of changes on the other side of the box. Sergio Garcia was replaced. How many other riders have we had? We've had Eric Fernandez.
Gutierrez was there briefly in the season. Vinay Radre. We've seen Harrison Bolt on that bike very recently as well. So yeah, you're on for 4 or 5 riders at the very least who've been on that second Oscar-Scuro through the season.
That was the side of the garage that won the championship last year. I mean, it's been quite a crazy reversal of fortunes at the side of the box. You know that crew chief Norman Rank, he'll be departing that team at the end of this season and cross to take over from what's on your screen, his side of the garage in Mark VDS. Mark Kennett will be filling in there next year. There is Lucio Nicastro, who in turn will then be moving across to American Racing for next year to work with Joe Roberts for a second time.
Yeah, while Dixon was on screen there, it is worth, I guess, reflecting on Jake and his Moto2 career, which comes to an end this weekend. This is his 124th Moto2 outing this weekend, 126th Grand Prix, might recall with a couple of MotoGP substitute appearances back in 2021. 7 Grand Prix victories for Dixon. He could still have another tomorrow. If he does win tomorrow's Moto2 Grand Prix, then he would move into the equal top 10 of Moto2 victories. He would equal the likes of Andrea Iannone, Frankie Morbidelli, Paco Bagnaia and Alex Marquez, who of course the latter 3 of those are all champions in this class. Brad Binder, Ralph Fernandez, Fermin Aldeguer and Celestino Vietti, all with 8 career wins in Moto2. Dixon currently on 7. He's also got 22 podiums to his name. One more tomorrow would see him tie Paul Espargaro and Alex Marquez, 2 former champions. And I know from speaking to the team that Jake Dixon is aware of those stats and does quite like the idea of being able to equal some former Moto2 champions in this class. You look at his championship results over the course of the last 4 seasons: 6th, 4th, 8th, and currently with the potential to make that 3rd over the course of the season. A consistent, genuine front runner in this Moto2 class over at several seasons. Never quite been able to translate that into a genuine title push into the last stages of the season, but he's a rider on and particularly off track who will be missed in Moto2.
Yeah, without question. He is good value both on track and off it, is Jake. As you said, never quite put a full championship challenge together, but he's been on the cusp of several title fights back in 2023. Even last year at certain points we were thinking decent season push and Dixon could well come in and steal the championship, and then of course this year as well he's always been kind of there in the background but never quite probably in the commanding positions. You see him go down into the 33.6s, which is impressive lap times, just 3/10 off the lap record now. And I think you look back to Dixon's career, we know that it is such a massive step coming across from a national superbike championship into the bear pit that is Moto2. I think what's impressed me most about Dixon is that probably at the end of the first 3 years, his first 3 seasons in this category, the end of 2019, when he had a really difficult rookie season for ATM chassis, which just wasn't competitive. The next year, when he had a very serious injury here at this track, broke his wrist, which was career-threatening. Then the following year, he made his comeback. That wrist injury was still lingering for 2021, and didn't really have a great comeback season. At the end of each of those seasons, I think it would have been so easy for him to have walked away from Moto2 and thought, you know what, could be competitive again at the front of BSB potentially, or even towards Superbike. We know that Jake said wanted to be on bigger machinery. Feels that bigger machinery is more suited to his riding style and his riding capabilities. It's so easy to walk away from this category and say, you know what, didn't quite work out, let's try something new. But he really did stick at it and just gradually became a better rider. I'm not just saying this because he's from a similar part of the world as me, but I really genuinely believe that had he been on Alex this year, it would have been in the fight for the championship at this point. I think kind of riding received at a more or less consistent level with 1 or 2 exceptions. I think Monica would have been in the fight for victories when this year he's been 4th or 5th.
It's victories in Argentina and in Malaysia, both absolutely exceptional, where he looked certainly in pure dry conditions, the class of the field throughout that weekend. To be fair, he didn't look far off in Austin either, and might well have won that race even had it stayed dry. We never got the opportunity to find out because it rained moments before the race. And of course, it is worth saying that we might not have seen the last of him in this paddock, because he's first in line to take over if any Honda MotoGP riders next season are absent through injury as their lead world superbike contender for next season. So we may not have seen the last of him in this paddock yet.
That was a key part of his contract as he signed Honda in World Superbike. He definitely a substitute line. They've had their fill with MotoGP racing. Don't quite have that fire in the belly anymore. So riders to get over all these things. He could well be here as a substitute in this MotoGP team next year. Interesting that we have Gil Herrera circulating with Manu Gonzalez just behind him. Both of those riders set personal best lap times recently to go 2nd and 3rd in this section. They have just set up realized that Max Ramirez behind it, confused with the blue F24 and the blue number 10, both of the yellow blues and white.
Both heading on to packages new for next season. We've not had confirmation I'm aware of yet of Marcus Ramirez, but there are reports that he might be moved forward next season. Here are the 2 title contenders then together on track, both going very, very quickly, both threatening Dixon and potentially the lap record. A 33.3 for Moreira, a 33.189 for Manu Gonzalez. That is a new all-time lap record. Your 2 title contenders now, 1 and 2.
It would be great to see 595, wouldn't it? Just to bring the season to an end.
Is that a fight that Diego Moreira will want to take on Sunday?
It is quite unlikely to reach that going into the final race, because we know that Diogo is a pretty intelligent guy. There's absolutely no point getting caught up in risking something like that at the final race. But hey, it's good to see Manu Gonzalez looking like his old self, isn't it, here in FP1? And it's been some time since we've seen him put a performance in where anyone else will be taking note in this Moto2 category. Consistent as well for Tony Arbolino. And in 4th position, he's looking up to sign off from the Blue Pramac team in a good way. Something of a running theme through this year. Tony Arbolino has a very good FP1. Gets stranded, not really able to make further progress from that point.
Yeah, we haven't seen him higher than 10th now in the last 4 Grand Prix since his 6th in Motegi. Not a bit more to that, really. More than that, had he not had his physical issues late in the race. Gonzalez now leads Moreira around the circuit. It's one of Manu Gonzalez's favourite hobbies in Moto2, showing Diogo Moreira the way around the circuit in practice sessions. I think it has irked Gonzalez at times that Diogo likes to follow at various stages in a weekend. Gonzalez does another low 133. As he Samson Authority. Couldn't see Sergio Garcia going up into second place. We know he's a bit of a circuit specialist. Bit of is actually not doing Sergio Garcia justice. If you go through his Moto3 career, 5 podiums around the circuit, including that maiden win back in 2019. He is a Valencia boy, and of course will be a regular on this grid next season. So perhaps we shouldn't be too surprised based on his pedigree around the circuit, but certainly surprised based on his recent Moto2 history.
Absolutely. It's a very good shot indeed. Sergio Garcia, one of those little Valley Moto mini machines that we saw yesterday in the Grand Finale 2025, and he'll still be very competitive here. Machine he was in, what machine he was on, he was always fighting front Moto3 at this circuit. Yeah, good to see a bit of a reminder of Sergio Garcia's talents. Those have been far few and frequent throughout this year. Stuff like Alex Scridge as well, to jump up into second, and number 11.
Yeah, what a run of the end of the season he's having at the moment. Back-to-back points finishes, 8th in Malaysia, followed by a 12th in Portimao. He's been in Q2 in each of the last 2 Grand Prix, and yeah, he's one of those riders that perhaps doesn't get the press that he ought to, given the machinery that he's on. But one or two are noticing Alex Scridge's performances in the latter part of this season.
And in a former guys, that Ford factory team, Ford factory team was NV Augusta. And they had a pole position here, didn't they? 1 year. Was it Simone Corsi?
Not that he started from it in the end, did he?
That team, the previous version of that chassis, at least showed some speed with this Valencia track.
Well, he's on course at the moment to potentially get himself into the 132s in this session and take the lap record away from Manu Gonzalez. Here's Danny Holgado, who unofficially confirmed in Portimao this weekend as the Rookie of the Year in Moto2. Will finish in the World Championship. Can't be caught by David Alonso behind him, nor can he catch Jay Dixon up ahead of him. 6th place at the end of the season for Holgado represents an outstanding job well done. We expected anything more from him this season, but then we expected the kind of heights that we've seen from him in 2025. He'll be another rider thinking I'm a genuine title contender for next season, but here comes a Scridge who's about to set the record. It is a 1:33.050, and we haven't said this many times. They right to applaud down there at Ford. The forward chassis, the fastest thing around Valencia right now.
Yeah. Alex Scridge, the fastest Moto2 rider around this circuit as it stands.
Ever.
Really impressive lap time, that 3/10 under Aaron Kinnett's previous lap record. We did say that Moto2 lap record will take an absolute fraction this weekend. Be surprised to see one twos in qualifying tomorrow, maybe even in the 31s. But seriously, Scridge at this early stage showing some real pedigree.
Just to underline what a good job he's doing, his teammate Jorge Navarro, who also knows the circuit like the back of his hand, is down in 25th at the moment, 1.9 seconds off the pace, and he's been out there all session.
Yeah, as we know, there's no multiple podium finisher in this Moto2 category. Jorge Navarro, 11 podiums in this category, in fact. So,
including here back in 2019 when he started from pole position. Yellow flags come out at turn 8 this time. Philip Salach who's responsible for that as he trudges away with a shake of the head. But who often have a chance to just leave that Bosque score over there and fast forward to next season with American Racing. He might well take it.
It's turn 6 now. I don't think
that is turn 6.
Yeah.
Some water in the workflow with our crash graphics because we incorrectly identified Guevara's crashing in 6 earlier on when he crashed at 4. And that is turn 6 for Philip Salach, although given how many riders have been through the session, I don't think we can put that one down to the circuit.
See that Jake Dixon come out of turn 6, running off the line on 30 track pace on the run up to turn 7 there. So it does seem as though that track, I mean, it's obviously in decent condition if we're seeing lap records at the moment, but yeah, you do need to be pretty careful, I feel, if you get off the racing line. Looks as though there's still quite a bit of dust and dirt down.
Salach is 16th at the moment in this session, of which there are just under 4 minutes remaining. Reminder, if you're just tuning in, we've had a half-hour or so delay to proceedings this morning due to some diminished grip down at turn 6, which caused 3 crashes at the start of this Moto2 FP1 session. Ethan Guevara, Adrian Huertas, and Yuyu Sasaki. Guevara got away injury-free from that one, but then crashed again at turn 4 once the session restarted. Huertas was stretching away, although we did see him moving. No further update on his condition yet, but we do wish him well. So we've now seen the crash for the Salach. Down there at turn 6, David Alonso to move himself up from 18th, and he climbs up into the top 10. And top 10 at the moment, which is covered by less than half a second.
It's exceptionally tight at the top here. David Alonso putting his name into the mix. We know that he gets stronger as race weekends progress. It's an understanding of the track and what it needs on the Moto2 machine. Surprised to see him gone in 12th as it stands. He was absolutely adamant he would be carrying the fight for the championship night into this round, but it's now he can just focus on going out there and winning. So, behind Justin Vietti, is he going to get pulled by the Italian? He is. It's maybe not the best bit of riding from Justin Vietti, who seemed to be unaware that Canet was behind him. And I think he's well within his rights to protest there. Vietti be a little more, I think, aware of just who was where on the track.
Not quite as awake as he ought to be at just a minute shy of 11 o'clock in the morning here in Valencia. Vietti, another rider who I think will be quite keen to see the back of this season, certainly the way his season has been trending in the final few rounds of the season. Vietti 8th in the World Championship, as mentioned. If Alvaro Reyes and Senna Regis score heavily this weekend, he could drop down to 10th in the World Championship, and he was one of my I didn't even think I was going on a limb by tipping Celestino Vietti to potentially win the World Championship this season, given how strong the Boscoscuro was last year and how good we know Vietti is. Once again, I guess, a Moto2 season where at times Vietti has flattered to deceive.
Sure, certainly been an eventful laps for Canet. That moment at turn number 6, was that turn 2?
We're not sure now, are we? We're questioning ourselves here in the commentary box as we see those graphics pop up. We can at least narrow down to one of the 9 left-handers around the Valencia circuit. We'll figure out the rest from there, but Canet did stay out on track, stayed up through his left knee, and he'll be visiting Simon Crowfar actually at the end of this session. That incident involving Canet, Celestino Vietti. Vietti, who's going to be launching the case for the defence in that one. So they nearly came together at what we couldn't confirm to you with certainty was turn 11 on the previous lap. Just look though, with 45 minutes of this session remaining, that Alexa Scridge for Forward is going to top this one. Get the press release written already, they'll be saying down there at Forward Racing, as Forward smashed the lap record this morning at the Ricardo Tormo circuit of Valencia. Some real sort of surprise-ish names up at the top. Scridge quickest, Munoz third. Of course, this is a circuit that, maybe not last year of course, but in previous years has held Junior GP and European Championship Moto2 rounds, so the likes of Scridge and Munoz, of course Garcia from his Moto3 days will know the circuit very, very well. They're all in the top 4 right now.
Garcia has finished 13th this year. It's not exactly what we've been used to seeing him toward the sharp end of 2025. He's also improves yet again to go solidify his 10th position. Impressive stuff from Scridge. Is this going to be the first time that he's ever led a Moto2 session?
I think it was. Certainly would be the first time in the dry that we've seen a Scridge do this. For the forward chassis too. It's can't go any further forwards from there at the moment. The only way is backwards for them now, having topped FP1, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if a Scridge can keep up this sort of performance through the weekend. So as mentioned, we've already seen Alex Scridge through this season. Qualified 4th back in Argentina by Q1 and finished 7th. And he then finished 8th from a top 10 qualifying in Malaysia. Jake Dixon is not going to deny him on his final lap of the session as he stays in 7th place. The 2 title contenders, if you're wondering, can't read the left-hand side of your screens, 2nd and 5th. Gonzalez ahead of Moreira in free practice 1.
Dixon clearly losing significantly in that final sector. What, 0.2 of a second the last couple of laps that he did. So he was having some real issues trying to turn the bike, get it to him into turn 14. So the light on one side of the forward racing box and a bit of anguish on the other. Ended on 25th position. His teammate is up there in first. Fortunately, it's been a pretty wretched season, hasn't it, for the number 9? And there it is.
We can confirm with certainty that one is turn 6, so we got it right in the end. Jorge Navarro, he now looks out at turn 6. He'll see he is rather exalted and pleased teammate, Alex Eskridge, with a new all-time lap record, who's waving to what is quite a healthy crowd already on this Friday morning. Here's one of the beauties of this circuit, the Bowls Stadium atmosphere we have. And it is a sellout on Sunday here on the Ricardo Tormo circuit. They've been starved of MotoGP action, of course, since 2023. It is Alex Eskridge, though, who tops free practice 1, an early Friday morning surprise in Moto2, with title chaser Manu Gonzalez second, Danny Munoz third for the IO squad, ahead of Sergio Garcia from forward receiving. Diogo Moreira, the championship leader, fifth, with Danny Holgado, Jake Dixon, and Albert Arenas, Alonso Lopez, and David Alonso completing the top 10. Barry Baltas 11, ahead of Tony Arbolino, Aaron Canet, and podium finisher for Portimao, Colin Bayer, Stella Regis, Chelsea Vietti, Ivan Toilet, and Philip Salach. Next up, Salach joins the Turn 6 club late on. Marcos Ramirez with 19th, head of Achi Fernandez, Vanden Gorberg and Zurutuza. Trujillo 24th, head of Navarro, who crashed at the end of the session. Hector Garza on the NTS, Ethan Gamara, who crashed twice in the first 5 minutes either side of that red flag stoppage. Phoebe Sasaki, another early faller, as was Adrian Huertas. We hope to have news on him in practice this afternoon. It was Alex Eskridge who set the fastest ever Moto2 lap at Valencia this morning as forwards, showing the way forwards in FP1. MotoGP is on the way in just a moment.
MotoGP's longest season in history has reached its final chapter as it comes down a record-breaking 2025 the Ricardo Tormo circuit in Valencia. The most beautiful circuit in Mediterranean Spain, Valencia blends old town charm and futuristic architecture, and first joined the calendar back in 1999. The final showdown gets underway with FP1 next.